Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Both Sides Now. Today we're meeting with the Hon Nikki Kaye, who's a former minister under the John Key National Government. So Nikki, thank you for being here and welcome to the podcast.
It's great to be here.
So we start every podcast off with a question about what is your political ideology or philosophy that you identify with?
I think, obviously I was a National Member of Parliament for 12 years. I'd consider myself centre-right, but strong social conscience and very liberal socially.
People often say that you were a relatively liberal National Party member. Is that kind of how you view yourself, like on the more liberal end?
Absolutely. My view is, and I think a lot of New Zealanders, particularly young New Zealanders as well, have a view which is you have the right to love who you want to love, to be able to live your life with maximum freedom, and I'm certainly that person.
A lot of people, including John Key, said that socially they try to be a bit more liberal or progressive, but economically a bit more conservative. Is that, do you think, a bit of a cop-out answer?
No, I don't think it is. I think particularly as well, I represented a seat it had people from, it was quite a marginal seat, the left and the right, and I met a lot of people who would say to me things like, New Zealand is a country, we've got a lot of small businesses, they believe in reward for effort and equality of opportunity, but actually when it comes to social issues, they're incredibly liberal.
I guess though, to be more liberal on social issues, typically you've got to spend more, and to spend more, you've potentially got to be, less fiscally conservative and less limited government. Would you say?
No, I wouldn't necessarily agree with all of those statements. I think again, we'll just sort of separate a couple of things. Firstly, I think there's a bit of a change happening across the world around people seeing that there is inequity and what does a new model look like from a financial perspective. I'm certainly, some of the work that I'm involved in is young companies coming through saying that they obviously understand a fiscal model where they need to create money to be able to employ people and give them jobs and build communities, but they also want to make sure that what they're doing is good for the planet and is good for society. So I think there's a bit of change happening in terms of the model. And I don't think my experience of politics is it's never black and white. Actually, often it's a series of complex trade-offs and a lot of people aren't intensely ideological.
Yeah. And so being someone with more liberal views in the National Party, how do you go about sort of balancing your personal views with the party manifesto? Great Barrier Island was a great example of that, where you did disagree with people in your party. It's not something that we see a lot of publicly at the moment, disagreements within a party. Yeah,
I think one of the things that I really liked about the National Party was that usually when it came to social issues, we had conscience votes. And so I fought for abortion law reform, I fought for same-sex marriage, I fought for the right for a small group of people to have the ability to end their own life. And we had conscience votes which enabled us to go off and be able to do that, totally separate to the party views. So that's one important mechanism. I think then secondly, what I would say to you is, and I give this advice to a number of potential candidates from right across the spectrum, integrity matters. So I think there are many examples in our history in New Zealand where people have stood up to the party, and I certainly did on that particular issue around the environment. It was tough, it was very difficult, but ultimately my experience of those people that do it is you often get quite a lot of support in the long run because you're actually being true to who you believe.
Is capital gains tax something everyone personally in the National Party agreed at the same time?
One of the things I say to people is, when you commit to being part of a caucus, there are confidential discussions that go on, and whether that's at the cabinet or the caucus level, that I would not breach those kind of discussions. But what I just say to you generally around housing is, it is very clear that we have had inequity over a long period of time over successive governments, and obviously there's some interesting stuff happening at the market now, but we're going to have to deal with it in some shape or form. Now, whether it's changes to the tax system, whether it's fixing all the costs that happened at a local government level, whether it's education reform to enable young people from lots of diverse communities to be able to have the opportunities to buy a house, there's a whole lot more that we have to do to enable people to be able to be homeowners.
Obviously, you just mentioned education. You were Minister of Education. There's been quite a lot of discussion the last week around streaming in schools and the teachers' union are wanting to get rid of streaming in schools. Do you have a view on that?
I think there's a few bits. One is, when I was Minister, I was involved in discussions around moving towards progress reporting, which really the principle is that we need to understand where young people are at in terms of their learning so that they can be able to see growth in their learning. But we're not interested in a whole lot of comparisons. We needed to have that benchmark, and that was the one core difference, I think, between the left and the right. But we were more interested in how they progress through. So that's more my philosophy, which is ensure you've got good data so that parents and young people can understand how they're progressing through the system, but try and do that in the best possible way that's the least judgmental. Look, so that's my general philosophical view, but one thing I'm really respectful of in a small country is I want to continue post-politics, to be able to work in a non-partisan way where possible. I clearly, I'm a national voter, but I want to be able to work with the left and the right. So I try and stay out of current affairs issues as much as possible, except on, I reserve the right to dive in, but particularly as a former minister, I think it's best that I stay away from it. Yeah.
Are your friends equally from the left and the right?
Yeah, I think they are, actually. I mean, one of the trends I'm seeing, and I don't know whether you guys are seeing it more as well, is the younger group that are coming through. Like, I'm working with a number of people who are social and business entrepreneurs, and they're in their 30s, is people are less tribal and they want less polarization. I think people are desperate for less polarization. And I certainly am very focused post-politics on things that will make a significant social impact, but that will also grow the pie for New Zealand. And that means that my network is incredibly diverse, and it's both the left and the right.
Do people ever sort of have preconceived notions about you because you were a national MP? Do you sort of meet people and they kind of don't really want to engage?
Sure, I'm sure that occurs. I mean, people are generally pretty respectful. I'm sure that occurs. And as I say, I've always been very proud of my history as a former National Cabinet Minister, former Deputy Leader. And so I don't shy away from that. And people, I'm not, I'm pretty clear. There's no illusion who I would vote for. But I think there's a difference. People have a choice post being inside the building as to what they do. And I hope that I can unite communities and make a pretty significant social impact, and that means being able to work with the left and the right.
Is the right better than the left? Presumably you voted on the right for the last however many elections. Do we really want a national government every single time? Again, my view is, well, there's two answers to that. One is, it's ultimately up to the public, and I trust the public. I trust New Zealanders a lot, and they do swing back and forth, because ultimately what a lot of people say to me is part of the reason for the cycles is they do think there is an amount of time, there's a shelf limit on governments, and I think there's a sort of a sense of wisdom of that. So I think it's perfectly natural to have the swings back and forth. I also think we're a reasonably centrist country. Yeah. And so I think people are less tribal than ever before, but I think that the nature of New Zealanders is they like to give people a go. You can have your turn. No, you can have your turn. And that's just part of kind of our DNA. On the swings back and forth and how sort of smart voters are. So, for example, as soon as Jacinda Ardern, before the 2017 election, became leader, they were polling much lower. They didn't change their policy manifesto. They just changed their leader. Same as when John Key left, they just changed their leader and went quite a bit down in the polls. I guess from that perspective, are voters actually making the right decision if they're voting more based on the leader and the swing?
I think that's a really interesting discussion. I haven't seen all of the data as to what decisions people are making and why. There's certainly been a lot of public commentary that it's become more presidential. I'm quite old-fashioned because I did a lot of door knocking, and I still get a lot of people who contact me. I have absolute confidence in the New Zealand public to balance up what they think is maybe a strong leader or not so strong leader versus the cycle and who needs another go in their mind, versus public policy. And I can see people making very complex thinking or decisions around who they vote for. And so I'm not one of those people who think it's an either or, it's either presidential or it's public policy. I think a lot of people at the moment, I can tell you what, I've been spending time all over Auckland and parts of South Auckland, Central Auckland, they are saying to me that with mortgage rates and a whole lot of things happening, there's some really challenging social issues at the moment for many families. They're pretty desperate around household costs. And so they're less focused on whether it's red or blue, they're just focused on trying to pay the bills. And so there's different points of history which also drive voters. And at the moment, I think people are trying to survive with mortgage rates, or they're trying to survive because they don't have a house and they're trying to just live and pay the grocery bills. And those are driving votes at the moment.
So philosophically, do you think we should be voting for the politician or the policies? So for example, when a Prime Minister comes into power, should they be making decisions that the public are a majority in support, or are they just elected and to make the best decisions even if they're not, they don't have public opinion on their side?
I think it is always going to be a balance. And I'll give you an example. Under our government, the mixed ownership model was not popular, but we were in the middle of the global financial recession, and the alternative, in my view, was to cut and slash health and education, and that it wasn't a popular decision, but John helped push that through, in part because we didn't want to be cutting health and education services at the time. So there are always, my experience of being in government and being as a cabinet minister is, and again, I think the public are smart, is that you're dealing with often as much as possible things that you've campaigned on and promised, but then there are always external circumstances. And I'm a former civil defence minister, so whether it's a global pandemic or the Canterbury earthquakes, you always have to accept that there will be things that mean that you have to change tack, and the public get it.
As I think, probably looking back in your political career, you're obviously relatively young when you entered Parliament. Do you sort of think that maybe you were too young, or how would you address criticisms of you being really young in politics?
I have a very strong view on this issue. I believe that we need to have a diverse House of Representatives. I think we actually have, you don't want to have all career politicians, and you don't want to have all investment bankers. If you looked at at our previous cabinet, for instance, you had someone who was a former teacher, an investment banker. You might have considered, even though I spent 3.5 years in London in corporate and public sector, you might consider me a career politician. My experience of the best governments are those that have people from different walks of life and can bring different perspectives to the table. So I get a bit frustrated when I hear people saying you only need this one type of politician. The most important thing in my view in politics, and I say this to a lot of people, whether they're 20 and they want to stand or whether they're 50 and they want to stand, is that you know who you are, because you are tested in every single aspect of your beliefs, that you have a plan of some things that you want to do to help change New Zealand, and that you can ultimately, if you're in a political party, be able to work with others in the community and the Parliament. You've got runs on the board demonstrating you can get some things done.
Did you ever, being so young, feel like you weren't sure who you were, or did you have a pretty good idea of that from a young age?
No, I had that from a young age, but it's interesting people don't actually, I've talked about this story publicly, but I knew my beliefs very young, in part because I was always helping people, and I just sort of stepped up in leadership roles from a young age. And also my family background, my parents split up when I was young. I just sort of took on positions of responsibility, and I was always very firm. Some of my teachers say this to me about some things that I wanted to contribute to the world. Other people don't get that until their 50s. Other people in their 50s never get that. So I think that I'm very much of a view, I've met some extraordinary 20-year-olds that would be phenomenal politicians now because they know who they are, they have the capacity to help change communities, and they can work as a team. I've met people in their 50s for which they probably don't know who they are, and they have found it very difficult in politics.
Do you think leaders are born or leaders are made?
If I was going to just gut instinct land on one of those, I would say they are made, and this is the education person in me, which is from a very young age, we can see the markers of progression, being able to speak and listen, being able to form social relationships. And I think we see character coming through, and often that is a result of environment and our parents. And so I think that there's a huge correlation between family background and events and how people's character are formed. And when I say family background, I mean, we often see people, I think, who have had quite a lot of trauma rise high because they get resilience, and they also have often empathy, which is really important when you want to help people in politics.
Obviously, and being so young, did you feel like you ever made sacrifices in your personal life to enter into politics?
Totally. So this is, part of, I've been very public. My health is not perfect. So I really talked in detail about the exit. It was, obviously challenging on numerous levels. But yeah, as I think I said at the time when I bowed out, I just wanted to sit on the couch and know what it's like not to be working sort of 100-hour weeks. And in fact, my niece said to me recently, I hope she doesn't mind me saying this, but my niece, she's in Australia, she said, the only time I really remember you when I was growing up was at special occasions. So that sort of gives you an understanding. And a lot of people who have children, they have far more sacrifices. I don't have children. But there's a huge impact on families and friends. And I've had a few mates since I bowed out who have said, hey, we didn't see you for a decade, effectively. So it does take a toll, but it's an incredibly rewarding role. And overall, I'm not perfect. My career wasn't perfect, but I'm extraordinarily proud of what I achieved, and it is an enormous privilege to walk into that building and to be in the House of Representatives.
Is calling Jacinda Cindy derogatory?
I think it is. Yeah. I mean, I think ultimately, and look, again, it's not a perfect environment. The political environment can be very combative, but when you get into name calling, I think, it's like anything in life, isn't it? You're losing the argument. But also, I do think there is quite a bit of misogynist behaviour still in the political environment. And I do think that the Prime Minister does get a larger share of that, which is hugely disappointing in the world that we live in.
You're obviously quite fortunate. You got to run against Jacinda in a number of electorate campaigns. How did you find running against her? I guess as compared to how you see her now as the Prime Minister, did you sort of see those prime ministerial traits in her when you were running against her for Auckland Central? Absolutely.
I mean, I think she has been marked out from actually probably even before she was in the building as a leader of some significant capacity. I certainly thought when I was campaigning up against her that she had some superpowers, and I think we've seen them in the national stage and also internationally. I think the Prime Minister Jacinda said this publicly, that we both experienced, and hopefully they've got somewhat better, an amount of sexism that existed. But I think, I certainly think she was marked out from a pretty early age in terms of her leadership potential, and that was obvious to me when I was campaigning against her.
Do you have much of a personal relationship with her now?
I think she said this publicly, we have a good relationship, but I haven't seen, I've literally been, in part because when I bowed out, I wanted to have a decent break. I've been pretty under the radar for a period of time. But I I would say we've got a good relationship. I mean, if I see her at a function or in the future, we have a good relationship.
Christopher Luxon said that climate change is a preeminent issue of our time. Is that something you agree with today?
Yeah, I do. I think that I've got a few views on how we get greater progress, both at a political level but also at an individual level. Partly one of the companies I'm involved with at the moment, we're thinking a lot about how you create that social change. And I think, firstly, we need to ensure that we have more people providing good data on what interventions will do. And I say to people, when I was an MP, one of the best presentations I had from someone was when he actually walked me through the numbers and the metrics of different policy interventions and what they will do. Because for a lot of people, I think they see this as too big. What can I do? What can't make a difference? So the more that we can really get in front of people with what not only their individual interventions will do to make a difference, but also large policy interventions, so good data. Second thing I'd say is, and this is a sweeping generalisation, but I am very hopeful and optimistic about the generation that are coming through, in part because I'm working with some of those young leaders. They are very focused on solutions for the environment. And they are, this is a broad sweeping generalisation, they are hungry for, when they're building companies, models that will be sustainable, that will give back to the community, and they're less focused on making money just for themselves. They're more focused on giving back to the community. So I am very hopeful about that generation that are coming through.
Do you think we may be then seeing, if by the generation coming through, do you think we might be seeing more of a slight tilt to the left of the political spectrum then, or?
No, what I'm seeing at the moment is actually a lot of, I think what's happened is we had this global pandemic. A lot of people, their life became more uncertain. They questioned a lot of things about the world. We've got some things that are happening, increase in polarization. You've got an increase in mental health issues, which is really challenging. And I find that a lot of people are saying to me, particularly the younger generation, they're not particularly tribal. They are very interested in pragmatic solutions, and they certainly, though, are very issues-based, for which they care about the environment. Again, these are sweeping generalisations. They have a strong social conscience. But I think a lot of people are open to either different political parties, but also to leaders that share their values.
Yeah, I strongly agree with your point on better data. It's one of my big criticisms of the current government, is that every climate policy you can have a dollar value per tonne of emissions reduction or avoided, and that's the simple comparison for the efficacy of a climate policy, and we don't compare, do just a basic cost benefit analysis in my view. Do you think National missed a trick, the John Key government, leading into that 27 election, not having climate change as one of your key priorities?
I think, what do I think? I was always very clear that I was very, whether it was helping create the Aotea Conservation Park, whether it was work that I did with the Blue Greens, very passionate about the environment. I'd prefer not to get into a,
For sure, yeah.
and I don't want to get into the old political space, but I think, I certainly would say whoever is in power in the future, the environment has to be at the forefront, both in terms of saving the planet, but then also if you follow where the public are at, I think it's increasingly an issue that is top of mind for people, if you look at the last 20 years.
Obviously, your time towards the end of politics, as you said, probably wasn't perfect. Do you sort of have any regrets about the way you and Todd went about that situation?
Well, again, I've never really talked about the detail so a lot of people have talked about various detail, and there's been a lot written, and I've chosen not to, because I think I had a great set of opportunities and it wouldn't be helpful. So that's the first thing that I'd say.
Yeah.
The second thing I'd say is, ultimately Todd's been very public about what was an extraordinarily difficult health situation. So that was pretty extraordinary. The other thing, though, that I'd say, and I said this straight off the bat as soon as everything happened, ultimately, if you're in a position of leadership and that fails, even though there was some extraordinary situations happening there, then it's really important to take responsibility. So I think it was a very challenging environment. I think there were a range of things going on, some of which are public, some aren't. I was not perfect in that situation, but at the same time, as I said very publicly, we were very focused on the fact that at 25 or 26% or even late 20s, we would lose quite a lot of Liberal MPs and we would lose a whole lot of ethnic diversity. And so that question of whether we could lift the ship to be able to save a group of MPs was front of mind. So even if I do accept that it was a very challenging situation for a number of people and I certainly wasn't perfect, I think there were pretty good intentions behind what occurred.
There's increasing political polarisation, I think, around the world big time, and I think it's encroaching on New Zealand. Even I'm super passionate about combating that. With that comes, I guess, a little bit of animosity towards the mainstream media. The Herald stuff, Radio New Zealand, do you think any of these organisations are biased or are contributing to in any way towards political polarisation?
First thing I'll say is I've obviously been out of politics for now about 2 years, so I'm not immersed in it. In fact, I've had quite a good cut from all of that. But what I can tell you is my experience of being in there. I actually had a very good experience of the New Zealand media. I think there are a number of people of huge integrity in the media. And I always get a bit nervous when people claim bias because I think sometimes it's that they don't like criticism. Criticism. So I actually have a very good experience with New Zealand media, and I would be very careful of ever claiming bias against certain organisations. But what I would say to you is, at the polarisation level, I do think, and I study this quite a bit in the education context as someone who's moving in circles across the world. In fact, I did a little bit of a presentation to some teachers in Bahrain with the OECD last year, where I've looked quite a lot at the issue of polarisation and what we can do to assist young people. And I think we need to focus more on critical thinking in schools, but also teaching young people to be able to understand when their network is not diverse. Because I see this with a lot of parents, but I also see this with some people in my network where, and this is not just young people, where people will say something as fact, but they are not able to distinguish between what's trusted information and what's not trusted information. So there's a lot of work going on globally in our education system around critical thinking, understanding what's trusted information. And the big thing I say to even some of my mates is, if you feel that you're getting all one stream of information via algorithms or via your network, diversify your network. Go and actively hunt out people who think differently to you, because I think we will have a less polarised world when we are able to have more civil conversations with people who think differently, which is why it's great to see you two here.
Do you sort of think that is a main driver with the polarisation? Is there anything you can kind of put your finger on?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. Again, I'm very interested in this area. Certainly, we have seen obviously this rise of social media. So I think you do, in the nature of various algorithms and things, you end up getting content that is similar to what you're scrolling through. So I think there is something in that. I think, secondly, and I'll be careful in the way that I put this just because of the former role, I think there's more research that has to go into this, but I'm seeing a trend from talking to some educators in different countries around young people who have potentially spent long periods of time online, and in part COVID has accentuated this, have not had the face-to-face conversations where they're able to argue and debate and moderate and learn kind of the different emotional cues of moderation. And so I believe a lot of people are lacking deep emotional connection, and part of that comes from community and more face-to-face kind of human time. And I think that the benefit of these types of conversations, particularly with people that you disagree with, is often people do moderate their behaviour. But when it's all one way, it can be hard to develop those emotional skills. So I think there's a lot more to be done at the policy and research level around our education system, critical thinking, trusted information, teaching young people diverse networks. And then I also think deep emotional connection, more community. These things are, from my experience of being a member of parliament and doing public meetings and dealing with really hard issues, is always get people into a room and people actually, their instincts are to compromise and be reasonable.
So if you had a policy superpower to fix all this, is there something you would do?
Well, like I said, firstly, it would be probably to strengthen in education systems across the world what we are calling 21st century skills, but particularly in the area of critical thinking, trusted information, and then teaching people about when they don't have a diverse network, so that we don't have, part of this issue of centralized networks where people are then just really only talking to people who think the same way. That would be one big policy intervention. And then I'm a massive fan of expansion of civic education and civic duty, because I think that encourages much more cross-pollination between different communities. And also this notion of service and what public service can do for societies.
Cool. I think that's a fantastic place to finish it. Those are the two big things we're really trying to push with this podcast.
Can I just mention one other thing?
Yeah, for sure.
Koitu, who you may be aware of, but they're in the public policy area, they recently released a report on social cohesion on the back of COVID. And I think that's a pretty good read around some policy interventions that we need to ensure that we're focused on to ensure that society is more cohesive.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, those are the two things that we're really about at the podcast, is breaking down that political polarization, but that really important to have that critical thinking to know what's right, what's wrong, but to be able to debate it and find your own information. So yeah, really appreciate your time, Nikki. Thanks so much.
I love the fact that you invited me, and say have a great day.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.